Something Pam Bondi said last week during the cabinet meeting with Trump should have everyone seriously concerned.
Just like we did with cartels, we're going to take the same approach, President Trump, with Antifa. Destroy the entire organization from top to bottom.
First of all, they're creating a fake organization. There's no formalized organization called Antifa. It's a movement. It's an anti-fascist movement that Trump is fighting against. So in essence, that makes him pro-fascism. Secondly, they're going to use the same approach they used against the drug cartels. If you don't recall what they've been doing to the cartels, here's a little reminder. Like the cartels being labeled a terrorist organization, they've labeled Antifa as a terrorist organization, although there's no actual formal organization. The cartels, they just started bombing and blowing up their drug-carrying boats, or what they allege were drug-carrying boats. So we don't really know because evidence was just sank to the bottom of the sea. And they just went and, blew up people. Their justification is saying they are terrorists, enemy combatants. And they're going to take that approach now with people they are going to assume are Antifa. This is so dangerous for this country. If they do indeed take this same approach, we're talking about turning the military on U.S. citizens. No due process. Just doing what they did to the drug cartels. Do you think they will really do that? Or do you think this is just trying to scare people from coming out and exercising their right of free speech, their right to protest? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Like, share, spread the word, follow, subscribe, and I will see you back here for the 411.
Yesterday, Pete Hegseth announced that the Qatari Air Force would be opening a airbase in Idaho, but that's not possible. It would require both the Senate and the House to sign off on it, and a whole bunch of other defense-related things would need to take place, and we've never allowed a foreign military to open and operate a military base on our soil, even as we do so around the world. So what's actually happening? The Qatari Air Force, as part of the Gaza peace deal, is getting F-15s from the U.S. military, and the U.S. military will train their pilots on how to fly them. So that's what's happening, and the Qatari Air Force is actually going to take over facilities that were built for the Singapore Air Force about a decade and a half ago when we trained their pilots at Mountain Home Air Force Base. So this isn't new. It's not uncommon for a foreign government to come in, build a facility, have their pilots come here, use it as their own facilities, their own base, their own maintenance people while being trained by the U.S. military. It happens in and around the Air Force fairly regularly with aircraft that we export. So this isn't uncommon. No, Qatar is not building an Air Force base in Idaho. No, Qatar is not going to be taking over a portion of Idaho. They'll be training alongside U.S. military pilots, just like we've done with Singapore and Italy and Spain and countless other countries.
If you're a young, pregnant American citizen woman who shows up in an ER and you get treated and they pay the hospital less for treating you than some illegal rabble-rouser who came in from some, South American country to do us harm, that is wrong.
Did you hear what he said there? Because I know he framed it as if he's fighting for the American people, but the actual words that came out of his mouth say the exact opposite. He said, and I quote, "If you're a young, pregnant American citizen woman who shows up in an ER and they pay the hospital less for treating you, that is wrong." He's saying he wants your healthcare to cost more. Not that he wants it to be easier for you to access or more affordable for your family. No, just that he wants it to generate more profit for the pockets of the ruling class. And he's hoping you just won't notice that little slip because he packaged it with a throwaway line about immigrants. He's counting on you to hate immigrants so much that you don't even notice how much he hates you, how much his party hates you, or to be more generous, how few they give about you or your ability to access healthcare. This is a man who has made time for press conferences and Fox News appearances every single day for weeks now. but cannot be bothered to do his actual job. He is Speaker of the House, but has not allowed the House to convene or hold a single vote for nearly 3 weeks now. So while active duty service members like my husband still have to show up to work every single day without receiving a paycheck until the shutdown is over, Mike Johnson has gifted himself and other elected Republicans a 3-week paid vacation so far. Because in case you were unaware, Congress doesn't stop receiving their paychecks during a shutdown, just like Congress won't lose their access to health care if Mike Johnson gets what he wants, because that is a burden that he expects the rest of us to carry. Also, he can slip more money into the pockets of the billionaire donor class that owns him. That is why it is so important that we tell elected Democrats to hold the line on this. Do not cave, period. If you are represented by a Democrat in the Senate right now, please call them today, right now, and tell them you stand with them as they fight for 20 million Americans' right to affordable health care, and you do not want them to give in to Republican scare tactics.
So Pete Hegseth had to walk back his comment that Qatar was building an Air Force facility on U.S. soil because understandably people on the left and the right were freaked out, which is another reason why Pete Hegseth should be nowhere near the position of Secretary of Defense. And now he's saying that they are just going to be training on a facility that we build. But I will remind you that you cannot trust anything coming out of this administration. And anyone who tells you that you can or that this is normal in some way is either very naive or they're gaslighting you. Qatar is responsible for some of the most outrageous human rights violations on the planet. And you'll remember that there was global outrage when FIFA held the World Cup there. But of course, Qatar bought their way out of that outrage. It is not normal for Qatar to have given the president a $400 million plane that he is planning on keeping, by the way, and not passing on to the next president. It is not normal that the president of the United States is building a $5.5 billion beachfront golf course in Qatar. And it is not normal that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, used to be a lobbyist for Qatar. I don't trust Qatar, I don't trust this administration, and neither should you.
Okay, are you guys ready for this? I don't know that you are. Who here does not want to be gaslit? Who here still has both feet on planet Earth? This whole giving Donald Trump credit for brokering a peace deal between Israel and Hamas is all a facade. As we speak, Netanyahu is quietly and discreetly mobilizing internally to hold snap leadership elections, primary elections. He's going for November 24th, and he's riding off of a peace deal has just been brokered. Netanyahu won, Israel won. So now his popularity polling is going up, and he's going to hurry up and hold snap elections. And what this does is it eliminates his opposition because they will not be able to mobilize in time to put forth an effective campaign. So now you might be asking, well, why give Donald Trump credit then? Why not just take the credit, Netanyahu, yourself for doing this? Because he is the one making the decisions, not Donald Trump. Well, that's easy. Because Israel has always tried to get the most Israel-friendly administration in office, and they got the most friendliest with the Trump administration. As a matter of fact, for all the control over our politicians over decades, this is the most controlled. MAGA Republicans are the most controlled. And so you've got this whole TikTok deal. As an example, you heard Netanyahu saying on camera that he looks forward to basically manipulating all Americans in all of the world with pro-Israel messaging on TikTok, since TikTok was purchased by MAGA billionaire donors, and Trump's administration is going to have a seat in managing TikTok. That's why he wants Donald Trump to get credit for brokering this deal. Here's the reality of the situation. There's not much left of Palestine. There's not much left of Hamas. Netanyahu already decimated all of them. No peace deal was needed because there really was nothing left. 67,000 innocent Palestinians have been killed since the attacks in October. However, since Donald Trump has been in office, over 25,000 of them were killed in 9 months under Donald Trump. Because as soon as he won the election, Netanyahu went unfettered, unchecked. He was able to do everything he ever wanted to do. And that's where Donald Trump needs to go down in history, not as some hero. So now the two dictator narcissists, one extremely smart and one not very smart, are supporting each other and putting systems in place to retain power indefinitely by messaging things like Trump brokered a deal. And that's what we're dealing with. So there you go.
Remember that time we taxed the rich at over a 90% rate? No? It doesn't surprise me, because the billionaires in this country want to pretend like it's a terrible thing. But let's have a little history lesson, shall we? Back during World War II in the United States, the tax rate was raised to 94% on anyone making $200,000 or more. This was to beat inflation and also provide money for the war effort. And while that 94% was just on any income they made over the $200,000, most of them only paid about 50 or 60% because of other deductions. So during that period of World War II, when the tax was raised on those making the most money, what was the result? We had massive economic growth and our GDP nearly doubled. And the growth came from massive government spending. Remember how Republicans like to tell you that the reason our country is so in debt is because of all the government spending? It's not true. We don't have a spending problem. We have a revenue problem because they don't make corporations and billionaires pay their share anymore. After the war, the U.S. had rapid industrial expansion, a surge in middle-class prosperity, low unemployment, and rising wages. And this continued until 1964, for 20 years, until they reduced it to 70%. And best of all, during this time, it was called the Golden Age of American Capitalism, despite Trump trying to refer to his second presidency as the new golden era. And we know he's not trying to equate it to this. But so far, his golden era is just making his billionaire friends more money as the rest of us go further into the poorhouse and get beaten in the streets. So despite billionaires and corporations and CEOs trying to tell you that them paying higher taxes won't solve the problem, we actually need to take away your healthcare, tell them to fucking shove it up their ass. Because just like how other countries put restrictions on firearms and magically all of their mass shootings stopped, don't let them try to lie to you here as well and pretend that raising taxes on the rich doesn't help the fucking economy. Because it does, and it's been proven to help.
Does anyone else find it interesting that they chose Idaho to install that Qatari military base? You heard me right. Yeah, now we're going to have a foreign military base on our soil for the first time. Now, do keep in mind that they actually do host one of our largest military bases on foreign land, but also keep in mind how much they have invested into the Great Trust. Also keep in mind how much they invest into our school system. And I'm not talking about elementary or high school. I'm talking about the universities. Think about the universities that have been fined heavily for not being, following those BDS laws or for being pro. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about who one of the biggest investors into the Great Trust is. I want you to think about the Israeli finance minister coming out and saying that the demolition phase had been completed and now it's time to figure out how to divide up the profits because the war has cost them so much. Now, who was one of those biggest investors? The ones that are putting the military base here. It's not about being left or right. I want you to see the bigger picture. It's all feathers of the same bird, and those wings spread globally. So what does this mean for you? What does this mean for me? Well, think about how those Idahoan farmers weren't allowed to water. Think about the land that was up for grabs, but not for sale, not to you, not to me, but to entities. Think about who those entities belong to. Could it be to the ones who are actually running the show? Now, that's why I don't get mad about people saying that they're pro-Trump or, anti-Trump, because really, if you think about it, Trump is, when you walk into a car dealership and there's that friendly person who smiles and says, welcome in, how can I help you today? And here's what we can provide. That's Trump. That's basically all he's doing. He's not the one making the decisions or anything else, even though he says he is at the podium. Think about the ones who are actually running the show. Think about how far those wings actually spread. Now think about the fact that we are wading through mud, fighting daily to try to keep things on the up and up, trying to get more back to a, what do you want to call it, democratic process. Now, a lot of people might argue and say, we don't live in a democracy. Oh, you're absolutely correct. We don't. We should be, but we don't. Now, the difference between a dictatorship and a democracy is that our voices are supposed to be heard, which they aren't heard, and they haven't been heard in a very, very, very long time. I don't think you understand how far back this really extends. But think about how everything is about to vastly change for us. What this truly means. This is not, hey, look at us all working together. This is for the greater plan, the great trust. Think about all those sanctions put on the ones who weren't in agreement with the tariffs. Think about where the tariffs were being placed, the highest amount of numbers. Look at how those particular countries were actually the largest investors, aside from Qatar, into the Great Trust. Now, going back to the Hegel's principle, well, you can't really have a problem that everyone wants to solve unless you touch on it emotionally and psychologically and financially, which they've nailed to a T. But now that they have, well, of course they have a solution for the trade route. That would be the Great Trust. Now, I actually did do it. It's in my playlist. It's only 3 parts so far, explaining what this Great Trust is and how it connects to the Abraham Accord and of certain people who were starting to try to talk a few years ago. And side note here, I've been in the naughty corner so I apologize for my absence. I've also been dealing with a family crisis and some medical issues. But I'm back and we're talking.
Good afternoon, mi gente. I've been trying to make this video, but it's a little bit too long and I don't know if to cut it in 2 parts. We're going to give it a try. If it doesn't do well, I'll break it up into parts and post it out there again. I think it's an important message everybody needs to hear, and I don't care if you're in the fucking left or you're on the right, but let's go ahead and get to it, right? Now, before I start this, I usually say, hey, my name is Brenda, and I talk shit about all things using facts and research, and today is no different, but yet today I'm going to talk a little bit about religion and Christianity in modern day. Not the Christianity in the Bible that it was intended to be used for, but let's get to it, right? I posted a video 2 videos back that talked about Gary Deese, a pastor out of Atlanta, and he had a strong message for modern day Christians. He says, you're calling yourself a Christian, but nothing of what you're doing are the teachings of Christ, which I would agree, and you can disagree, right? You can disagree. None of it is the teachings of Christ. And I can give you plenty of examples, because while I am no longer a religious person, I am a spiritual person. But before I was a spiritual person, I was a children's pastor, and I was a Christian for about 20 years. Okay? And I left the church because what I saw in the church was not what I was supposed to be seeing in the church. And it wasn't the teachings of Christ. It was pastors sleeping with their congregation, and it is what it is, and that happens a lot, right? But he went on to say that all these people claiming to be Christian, right? White Christian nationalists, white supremacy, racist people, MAGA, the president of the United States, they're not Christians at all, because nothing of what they do is the teachings of Christ. Now let me go ahead and get down to it, right? You know, you do know that plantation owners and slave owners claim to be Christians. You know that the KKK and white supremacists always claim to be Christian. They wear the white robes for purity of Christianity. But they also, you do know that the insurrectionists that broke into the White House and threatened to hang Mike Pence and kill Nancy Pelosi also claim to be Christian. There were groups of people claiming to be Christian and with Christian paraphernalia there, right? You do also know that, you know, a lot of mass shooters claim to be Christian, right? And so if that's the example of modern day Christianity, then again, it's not Christianity, is what he had to say. And then he went on to Charlie Kirk and also said that Charlie Kirk would say something like, you know, Christ spilled his blood so you may have everlasting life. And in the same sentence say Martin Luther King was an evil man and civil rights was wrong. We should have never given Negroes equal rights, right? Those are the kind of things he used to say. As a matter of fact, his last word was a derogatory remark saying, do you mean gang? What are you talking about? Gang violence. He knew exactly what they were talking about. They were talking about mass shooting done by people that look like him. And of course, he can't accept that. So what did he have to say? Which were his last words, which he will be remembered by the way. Okay. And so here's my 2 cents into that. right? When I was in church, I taught children's church, and I used to do a lot of show with the kids. And one show we did was that song, Basic Instructions Before Leaving Earth, which always resonated with me, that we are called to be good humans. We are called to be good people. We are called to help those that can't help themselves. That's what I walked away from Christianity with, and I still keep that real deep in my heart. And if you ever saw me in the street, I help an old lady get up. I will help her across the street. I will help her to her car. And I'm not just saying that for flex. I'm just saying that if you ever met me in the street, that's exactly who I am. And those are principles that I kept from me from Christianity. Okay? And what we're seeing today is a bunch of people being hateful and voting in a president we clearly knew was racist. We clearly knew he was hateful, so that they can validate their hatefulness. And I heard that on a live by a lady named Mayday. MAGA has only been validated to be racist. And I agree with that. That's why you see what's happening today. Right? But the basic instructions of the Bible was to help your fellow man when they were hungry, when they were sick, and that's not what you see today. You see humanity turning against humanity. And my last thing that I want to add to that is this, right? For the people today thinking that this will not have consequences, oh, how wrong you are. Because you are the consequence of what your forefathers did. That's why you complain so much that you don't want to pay reparations, that you don't want to hear about slavery anymore. You don't want to hear about the civil rights movement. You don't want to hear about none of that, right? Because you've been hearing it your whole life because of what your ancestors did. So now let's put that into today's perspective. You don't think that your children and your grandchildren are not going to pay the price for your hatred today?
That is why I'm using my authority as Commander-in-Chief to direct our Secretary of War to use all available funds to get our troops paid on October 15th. One of the questions that come to mind is this: can anyone tell me where he's getting the funding from to do this, and how sustainable will it be? If he has a rainy pot fund set aside to bail out our men and women in uniform, then he shouldn't have a problem bailing us Americans out as well. Our healthcare costs are going through the roof. Our grocery prices are going through the roof. Inflation is up. Unemployment is up. Our utility bills are up. So is the rent. And so now that Donald Trump is acknowledging that he has these rainy day funds set aside, it is now time for him to start helping everyday Americans out with what we need him to help us out with. Forgive all the student loan debt, because we know you got the money. You're sending Argentina $20 billion. You mean to tell me you can't help us Americans? You're even allowing the Qatari government to have access to our military base while the government is shut down. This is totally, in my opinion, more evidence that Donald Trump is not America first. If anything, it's America last.